So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Will Thomas. I work for Ridge Vineyards up here in Healdsburg. And for those of you who do know me, you know that this is about to get real. So everybody take a deep breath. It's okay, relax. The heavy science is over. We're going to start thinking about technology. So when I was coming down, I should probably thought about changing the title to Thinking About Using Technology to Advance Wine Growing Practices, because I'm going to talk about technology by talking about not technology for a second. So I'll get there, I promise. Well, just bear with me. But first, we're going to talk about baseball, something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. So over the last 20 years in baseball, there's been this kind of false premise, this adversarial relationship between sort of the scouts here on the left who trust what they see, and people who kind of dive into the numbers, these sabermetrics people who kind of look at the numbers and kind of look at the numbers that the sport generates and interpret that. And so you can kind of see that the naysayers are here to kind of say that it's changing the way baseball is played, it's going to kill it, it's going to, why do we need more evaluation methods? It's much to our chagrin, it's here to stay. It's going to change the way the game is played. People aren't going to steal bases anymore. I mean, see, you can see it here in the data. Look, runs are staying the same and stolen bases are going down. And so you're probably thinking, like, what does this have to do with anything? So this one guy said question everything a long time ago. And so, for me, the questions that I ask is, okay, let's go into the numbers. All right, now look, obviously you're not going to go in here and figure out all this right now. But what you are going to see is that maybe there is a trend, and maybe there's something a little bit different than the information we've been presented before. And that maybe it actually has nothing to do with, the way the game is being played, and actually the fact that players got older for a little while, and maybe that's kind of why they slowed down. So, the reason I bring all this up is, yes, eventually we're going to talk about grapes. The next slide, I promise. But, just kind of check some of those preconceptions that we have about all this stuff, at the door a little bit, because, if we sort of take a step back and start thinking about what we're thinking about, we might really, open ourselves up to something, that could be pretty cool and find some sort of advantage. I told you there would be grapes. So first we're going to talk about a conversation I had with a friend recently. This is shared with permission, so you don't have to worry about it. This person is not here, so they can't defend themselves. And afterwards, I'm going to go through a couple of examples of using some technology for us that it did work and didn't, and then finally kind of the end. So this is me and my friend, and you'll note, most of you know one guy here, but the other one, this dude in blue, they're on the same team. They both work for the same guy, all right? So my friend was telling me that I don't need technology in my vineyard because, we had a client try it, we proved it wrong, it doesn't work. And functionally, my answer is, a chainsaw doesn't really care what it cuts down. It's not really there to provide a value judgment. It's simply there to report something, give you information that maybe you didn't have before. He says, yeah, but you know what? It's just too much money. I'm not going to use it every year. You don't use those every year. But nobody's going to say, let's not buy a frost fan. It disagrees with my philosophy on this cultural practice. Like, I'm very set in my ways. Like, I'm take your pick, right? Physiology. It could be irrigation, fruit thinning, whatever it is. It disagrees with how I view the world. Well, at the same time, maybe we need to be a little bit more fluid in how we approach, the way that we grow our grapes. Okay, you know what, Will? That's enough. I don't want to hear it. I've been doing this for forever. That's it. Okay, but we all had to start somewhere. And so for me, starting somewhere was where, technology is, commonplace. Like our vineyards are connected to a lot of different things. So, for me, trying to find the tool that makes the most sense for the problems that we're trying to correct in the vineyard really has to do with, operator. So for me, I want to make sure that I'm using the tool correctly and not trying to sort of, push it the wrong way. So, sometimes it does work, right? So this is a defunct, metric thing from about 5-6 years ago that doesn't exist anymore, but this is what it gave us. And so it was this little petiole dendrometer. It just sat on the petiole and measured the daily oscillations in the size of the petiole. Very minute differences. And you can see that this is the same vine. The blue line is a medium VPD day in a well-watered situation. A month later, we have that same one, which, a much bigger amplitude, right? So this would imply more stress. Over a course of a 2-week period, you can see that the daily oscillations have a downward trend. You can see that we stepped in here and did a short sort of 8-hour irrigation. Stress didn't really change, but come back a week later and hit it with some more, and all of a sudden we've done something. So now, I don't want to say that this is the irrigation regime that you should use for everything, for all your blocks everywhere, every year. But for me, and for this one parcel that behaves like this, it worked, and that tool helped me learn something, and it taught me something about my vineyard. And I thought, okay, great. Let's combine this with the sap flow. Let's see what we see. They're going to talk to each other. We're going to have synergistic, data amazing, and it's chaos. And it doesn't even matter that I didn't label this because they're nowhere close to each other. And then there's this, which, let's see if we can play it. So this is some road rod spore trapping that we did a long time ago, 2015. And the idea was that instead of putting, say, 1 trap per 10 acres, we put 15 traps in 30 acres. And I wanted to interpolate the data and find if there was a sort of place that the mildew was starting from, or some sort of pattern. And Mother Nature kind of saw this and said, that's cute. And chaos ensued. This is biology. This is not this is not predictable. Mildew has other ideas apparently about how it wants to go. Even the models, can't even agree with each other, let alone what's going on in the field. The lowest numbers we got in the models, the highest spore counts we had all year. So riddle me that, Batman. But again, if you don't try it, you're not going to know whether it does or doesn't work. And in this case, it actually showed us that, okay, this technology maybe isn't quite ready for what we want to do with it yet. But at the same time, right here, I have a different kind of station now that's a continuous spore trap that monitors stuff 24/7. It sucks in air all day and reports it to the cloud. Gets you alerts on your phone, right? So if we didn't give this a shot, we wouldn't know that it's insufficient and then move on. And then sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. So before I started with Ridge, there were some soil maps made that, we got all sorts of fancy stuff done. It was, potassium, calcium, magnesium, all this stuff. And we tried to get it to talk to the NDVIs. I had these maps made where we were trying to figure out if there was some sort of correlation between depth to root restriction and, chemically what was in the soil, and correlate it to the aerials. And this is what they came back with. And the moral of the story is the difference between this area here in orange and this area here in blue and purple is that this was a cow pasture for 50 years and this wasn't. And there's nothing I can do about that. But I got the answer, right? So, we can try and correct it with compost, but again, you sort of have to, know what your problem is and, try to figure out how to address it. So, our honest moment. So remember our premise from the beginning? So sabermetrics actually isn't really, kind of spelled like that. It should be more like this, S-A-B-R. The E is kind of extra. And that stands for the Society for American Baseball Research. And it was founded in 1971 by these 16 folks up in Cooperstown, New York, where baseball was allegedly born. And they were there because they thought that baseball was a significant American and social institution. They wanted to preserve the game through historical records and facilitate dissemination of information. They stimulate the best interests of the game, right? These guys cared about baseball. They didn't want to ruin it. And in a way, they did make it better. Because this is our graph from the beginning, but the line in green, this is success rate. So players are actually still stealing bases, and they're getting better at it. And they've actually, are probably more opportunistic and more successful. So, looking through the numbers and finding a reason to, when to go, when not to go, kind of gives you a little bit of perspective. So, ultimately, I feel like, technology is here because, one person said to another person over dinner, hey, I think that's a good idea. Somebody should do that. I'd like to have it if we could do this. And, I think that things are going to change a lot in the next 10 years. It's a good time to be a consumer. I think prices are going to come down. I think there's going to be a lot of different alternatives. So I'm not saying you should buy everything. I'm not even saying you should buy one thing. I'm just saying you should think about it because, why close ourselves off to different options? So thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Any questions?
I have one, Will. When we were discussing this discussion and trying to figure out exactly what we would be presenting, you mentioned that price was becoming a significant issue with a lot of technologies, and not in that adopting technologies is more expensive. In fact, it's now less expensive. And so how has that changed your platform as a wine grower and as an early adopter to new technologies?
You know, I'd say that, I mean, you get what you pay for, right? So if you're doing something that's, you know, using a tool that's maybe less expensive and higher throughput, the idea would be maybe to, you know, put more of them out there, try to cover more ground. So, you know, kind of like what we did with the interpolation. If I had, say, you know, low cost weather stations that would survive a season and, you know, probably under $50 each, like, yeah, I'd probably blanket a ranch with them and figure out what kind of temperature dynamics were going on over there that I didn't know about before. But at the same time, you know, if you've got the really shiny, expensive toy that the intern's not allowed to touch, you know, then obviously you're not going to be doing that as shotgun. You're going to be much more precise and much more measured in the, you know, the work that you do. And so I think that's kind of two ranges of the bell curve. And you know, if you've got your 10 Chardonnays, there's the one in the middle.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Will?
Thank you.
Thank you.